I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What's up, world? Welcome again to another edition of I Mix What I Like Live right here on Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball. Very happy to be your host. Very happy to be here. Very happy to be greeting you this fine Friday morning, East Coast, United States, at least where we are. And hopefully you're having a fine time wherever you are, whatever time zone you're in, and whatever time you happen to see this. To those who are here live, definitely good morning, greetings, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Please, as Ear Doctor says, reach out there quickly and tell a friend to jump on in. I think we have a great show. Brother Kaba is going to be here. Soon enough, we get another, what for me is a great, in addition to Brother Kaba, we get another edition of the Too Black and Not Black Enough segment here, where Brother Too Black is going to join us from the Black Myths podcast to get into this Cuban, well, a broader discussion of hip hop and politics, but starting or centering at least the recent story out of the gray zone about U.S. and State Department involvement in popular cultural production of Cuban, anti-Cuban revolutionary rap in Cuba. So I look forward to getting into all of that. But first, since he's here, Brother Kaba, good morning, man. Good to see you.
Good morning, my brother. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Yeah.
Good to see you again, man. How you doing?
Better seen than viewed. I'm good, man. How about you?
As good as could be expected. And right out of the gate, though, I did want to, you know what? I don't even have it ready. That's messed up. I wanted to continue to encourage people to support our dear sister, somebody I know you know very well.
Yeah.
Who continues to need our support. And as I've been trying to say here, represents what for many of us are the people we know, but who don't get the attention. You know, so I know people who are watching this may not know Katya Stitt personally, may not have even heard of her, but she just is, again, I ask people to just think of all of the countless people that you know who drive everything. In this context, media, movements, politics, organizing, community, but who aren't on any platform, who even if they run a platform, don't use the platform or can't use the platform in cases like this to self-promote or to raise awareness about their own concerns. But somebody who has given up and continues to give herself tirelessly to struggle and supports you know, as I've said, me personally, my crew personally, our crew collectively, but more importantly, she holds up so much of what we're trying to do. So I put the link in the chat. Please consider dropping a couple of dollars and help her get much closer to her goal than she currently is.
Yeah. And Katya, you know, for those who know, I have a radio show on WPFW where she finally was made the full-time program director after like 6 years of being on an interim basis, which is ridiculous. And it's all kinds of stuff. It's just bad. All kinds of things that are bad. And she still held on and was still loyal to that station and never said anything ill of the station. She always allowed, just like now, she basically just allowed us to speak for her. And I think that speaks volumes. She's actually the reason why I'm on the station through you. You know, you made the connection with me and her to get me on the station after you left, and everybody wanted that 10 o'clock Friday spot, so I couldn't get that because somebody had already claimed it because that Jared Ball made it hot on 10 o'clock on Fridays, man. So I was trying to get that one, but then she was like, well, you know what? Somebody else got it, but you know what? We're going to give you Mondays. How about that? We're going to do something new. And I was like, okay, we're cool. So, you know, but Katya Stitt she's a real one.
And I appreciate your version of how that went, but no, but she really is. I mean, she's a remarkable person, and anyway, so I really do hope people can help spread the word and get her some of the help that she needs.
Look, man, George Zimmerman, and all these other people that have killed Black people, almost like bounty hunters,
you know what I'm saying?
Raise all kinds of funds, like in no time. They get almost like a reward for killing Black people. And this is a person who's helping to help Black people and other people. You know, she's just she's a humanitarian. She's just a good person, man. And so we could do better. We could do better.
Well said. I like that. We could do better. So listen, I've been talking a lot before we move into the hip hop thing. I've been talking, obviously.
Oh, and one more thing, man, on that, because on that, it's so unfortunate, man, that and I feel so bad that I can't even say anything about it on the radio station, because she doesn't want that to happen. She's like, she made it very clear it's not proper. You shouldn't do it, even though we probably could get away with it, but it was by her. Just another way to highlight her character, just another example of her character. She's like, no, please don't do this on the air. It's not proper. This is something that's not affiliated with the station, even though it is, because she's employed full time and doesn't have the insurance to cover it. But it just speaks to the type of person that she is. And you were on there. You were on the show this past Monday, and we couldn't even talk about it on that particular station. So I give you props for every day. For raising this up and making sure that people know that they can donate to this sister. So that's the last word on that.
No, I appreciate that. And actually, I know you said it was the last word but I just want to. I have to say one more thing. I never understood whether it was the Pacifica bylaws or some other regulation within public radio or broadcasting or FCC or whatever that makes that prohibits this kind of. But it always, because there were so many other examples. I mentioned Damu Smith was another one. There were so many other cases where people who give everything to the community and to that station couldn't then have the station publicly work for them when they in their time of need, which I always I
think it has to do with like nonprofit status, like say like a nonprofit can't advocate for a particular, like if they're doing politics, they can't advocate for a particular politician or even party. So I think it just has something to do with that, the fact that it's a nonprofit. Yeah, but it's unfortunate. But,
whatever it is, it's just crazy about. It speaks to the situation that I think, in some ways, is a segue to things we're going to get to. Speaks to the situation we're in, not only broadly speaking, but in terms of our relationship to media and its relationship to community. Media is not here to really benefit communities, particularly ours. So absolutely. So anyway. But as I've been talking, we've been doing a lot here around. I've been just whining and complaining about crypto for a couple of weeks now, and I appreciate that you and others have
been contributing to the delinquency of Jared Ball.
Yeah, he's sending me more rabbit holes to go down and chase and just but more importantly, just sending some interesting information. So yesterday on the remix. I mentioned a story. I think it was yesterday or sometime on the remix this week. I mentioned on a story about new legislation coming from Congress as it relates to crypto. That story's focus was on the legislation's whittling away of whatever is supposed to be protecting anonymity in blockchain. It was starting to whittle away the secrecy and the privacy rather that users are supposed to have. But this story that you sent to me the other day brings up another issue that I hadn't or didn't notice or didn't catch from another story or wasn't covered in the other story that I saw, but focuses on taxes. And the short of it is that Congress is passing or is attempting to pass or within, as it says here, buried within this new infrastructure bill is a provision to help pay for the American infrastructure by taxing cryptocurrency profits to the tune of $28 billion. so that if you are defined as, in this case, in the other story was, if you were defined as a broker, then that whittled away your privacy in terms of what data was unprotected or could be surveilled. And here they're saying if you're defined as a broker, then you get hit with having to report to the IRS and getting hit with taxes, and that this is being described as what is going to kill the industry as it relates to, or ends up being a de facto ban on crypto mining in the United States, according to one crypto lawyer, Jake Chervinsky. So I just thought that was interesting. And is yet another, to my point, or one of my points is specifically that the issue is politics, not economics. And then here again is where that point becomes clear. If they want to step in and write policy and legislation to tax it, or to make it go away, or to support it and help it grow, that's they can do. And then the wealth that is generated from it, they can determine, as could we theoretically, if we ever assume political power, where the wealth goes, or how the wealth is created, etc. So
yeah, and a tangential point to the point that we've made over and over again about the fact that the people who've invested early are the ones who were pretty much going to reap most of the benefits. Connected to that, this story and that part that you just pointed out is the fact that most people who are into investing and finance, they tell you that if by the time the masses hear about something, by the time you see it on CNBC, by the time popular culture, it becomes a part of popular culture, it's already too late. It's way too late. Like by the time you and I hear about it, the value is gone. Like the people who understand finance will tell you that about any stock, anything. This is just another form of stock. So when you got the rap videos and the rappers and the Jim Jones and the crypto Kool-Aid and all that stuff going on, it's too late. It's already gone.
Yeah. So we'll continue to look at it and cover it and discuss it. And if it turns into a mechanism that liberates us collectively, I will happily stand down and apologize and join the freedom. But until then, I'm going to, we'll keep it up. Now, one more thing, as sort of as a segue, but not really, but just a piece that I saw, because one of the rabbit holes I've been going down deeply lately is Drink Champs, Noriega's Drink Champs. And a lot of contradictions here, admittedly, but I love the program and would love to emulate that in more routine way in what we do, if that were possible. But I happened to see the episode from 2016 the other day where he sat down with KRS-One. And there was a lot of very interesting things. Obviously, when you talk to KRS for any length of time, there's going to be a lot of interesting things said. Some things that I found a little bit debatable. For instance, when he said that he mistakenly quoted in there that the Constitution, he quoted the Declaration of Independence as the Constitution. So he quoted he said that the pursuit of happiness is written in the Constitution, therefore federally guaranteeing our protected right to being happy. So he was trying to make a point that if you're stressed and depressed, you are technically in federal violation of the law. And I was saying, well,
wow.
Not only is the pursuit of happiness written in the Declaration, not the Constitution, but anyway, so that was but there were also a lot of gems. He retells the story in greater detail than I've ever heard of the origins of the battle with MC Shan. He goes into a lot of other things, and then there was this one little piece that I want to show here that says a lot about a lot of things. The context being most immediately at the time breaking news around, or the more recently revealed news around Africa Bambaataa and the allegations of his molestation of young boys. But anyway, I just wanted to play this little bit and see what you and others might think about this, because I thought it reverberates beyond just this discussion. But check this out.
So one day I got a call from Kool Herc.
Okay.
Right? Which is, for me, I'm a real hip hop guy. You know what I'm saying? I respect everything that came before me. Right. And when Kool Herc called me, I had called him something. I said, "You're the godfather of hip hop." And I said it once, and he let it slide. And then I said it again, and he let it slide. But then the third time I said it, I said, "Kool Herc, let these motherfuckers know you the godfather of hip hop." He said, "Nori, hold on. Let me stop you. I am the father." Do you agree with that statement?
Yes.
I totally agree with the statement.
There's huge debate on it.
Okay.
Because everyone wants to take credit for hip hop now for its origins. We call, technically, to be scholarly correct, Kool Herc is called the recognized father of hip hop. The recognized father of hip hop. We call him the father of hip hop.
All right.
And the reason we call him the father of hip hop is because Bam called him the father of hip hop. Grandmaster Caz called him the father of hip hop. Pee Wee Dance and Grandmaster Flash. From this group, and Crazy Legs, called him the father of hip hop. Now, this is a family situation. All these guys, we all know each other, and they know each other.
But you're their younger homies. Correct?
Oh yes, no doubt.
Go ahead.
No doubt. Herc calls me the son of hip hop.
Listen,
because
let me break it down for me.
Yes.
Right? For me. All right. For me, when I heard Herc say that he was the father, I automatically saluted that. Never. Yeah. And then I thought of Bambaataa as the godfather.
Yes.
And then I think of you, Rakim, Big Daddy Kane, as the fathers.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And then after that comes Wu-Tang. Like, we're your little cousins. Wu-Tang, Mobb Deep, the Fat Joes, the Capone and Noriegas, the MOP. We're actually your sons direct. Like, I don't know, pause. I know these new generation, but you're actually our fathers.
Right.
Like you, Rakim, Big Daddy Kane. And so I have to ask this question, with that being said, with the name being, like, how is hip-hop supposed to respond to the Bambaataa? Like, how are we supposed to do that?
Because what angle you want to take it from?
I just don't know. That's why it's a generic question. What should we do? Because you being our father,
sure.
Whatever you say, I have to move accordance to it.
Well, first of all, controversy is not truth. What you want is truth right now. You want truth. Right. But truth is also not information. It's not gossip. It's not even conversation. For me, if you keep it hip hop, nothing can be taken away from Africa Bambaataa's contribution. Nothing. Just keep it hip hop.
Right.
But if you want to dig into dude's personal life and accusations that's being made and so on, personally, I don't give a fuck.
Right.
Personally.
Right.
Look, if somebody was harmed or whatever was done, or whatever, y'all deal with that shit. What? Deal with it.
Right.
That don't stop hip hop.
Right.
That don't stop what you did
take
for hip hop.
Take away the legacy.
Don't take away none of it. History's history.
Right.
Right.
But deal with that. That's personal. I don't, I don't even know what to say.
I don't know the facts of the case.
No, but even if you knew the facts,
right?
You know what I'm saying? A person like me, I deal with dudes that are questionable all the time.
Right.
Not just if the accusation is rape.
Right.
I know dudes that are doing, you know what I'm saying? Right. If you know anybody from prison, if you know anybody from the shelter, if you know anybody, if you live really in the hoods, you know shooters, you know dudes running from your man might have an open warrant on him right now. Right now. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I'm not judging these motherfuckers, man. It's my nigga right here, yo. That's it.
Right. Right.
Now, what you do in your crime and your shit and your bullshit, whatever you doing, that's on you. That's you, my G. That's whatever you doing. That's how I always dealt with it. I can't pick and choose, say, yo, this dude right here. I mean, I was producing Just Ice album, right?
Who's crazy? I heard he came to Queensbridge by himself. Is this story true?
Yes, it.
All right, so I'm gonna stop it there, but what did you think of that response?
I remember that. I forgot about it, and I guess I might have tried to forget about it to suppress it. I guess I think that's ridiculous. I mean, to say that to that molestation of children, of minors, I don't give I don't agree with that at all. It's not just his business. It's not like he likes to have sex with, eating ice cream and watermelon juice or something like that. That's your own thing, whatever. And I might be saying that's my stuff. I don't know. I'm just might be projecting. But it's not that innocuous. We're talking about harming children. Okay, that's not just his business. That should be all of our business, particularly if we're talking about a culture, and hip hop being a culture about the community and about the people. Certainly, we have to protect our people from predators. And again, these are all allegations. I don't think they've been proven, but I think enough people have come forward to raise some serious questions. And even if if he's, whatever the case is, he hasn't been tried or anything like that. But the allegations are too serious to just dismiss, whether or not he did it. It's the allegations are not, the response shouldn't be, I don't give a fuck. That shouldn't be the response. The response should be, no, we need to look into that.
So I believe he's ready to join us. I'm gonna bring my man 2Black up here. Good morning, welcome, and again, thanks for another edition of the 2Black and Not Black Enough segment here at
What's good? What's good?
Good morning. I got that same shirt too. I got that same shirt from Target, man. I know exactly where you got it. I got that exact. I almost wore it today. Matter of fact.
Oh, well, speaking of which, mine is a DC reference, but again, I'm from the PA tape era. Shout out to the PA tapes. Anyway, 2Black, let me ask you, since you jumping in, if you had did you catch the clip? Did you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I had a question first. Was that what he originally said, or was that he said this again? Because I remember when he said something similar. Was that the original statement, or was that like just recently?
I honestly don't know the order. Okay. I had never heard any of his statements. I'm catching up to all of this in terms of this show and these statements. So I honestly don't know the timeline. But one, I just want to come back very quickly and just double back to say that I really like how Noriega set up that question. And if you watch the show, I think he's very kind of genius with his interviewing, man. Anyway, so yeah, that I don't know, but yeah, 2Black, I don't know if that was first, second. I'm not sure what that was.
I mean, it doesn't really matter. I think it was a bad statement regardless. But I was just curious if he doubled down on that, or that was the first time he said it. But I remember when he said something like that, when the accusations first came out, I remember the response to it. I mean, I don't see how you could defend that. I don't know how we have hip hop culture if we're just letting that shit happen. Like we can't say we represent hip hop, but we're letting boys get molested and we just don't give a fuck. Like I just think that's a very like heartless response. I understand that we all deal with people who have questionable pasts in some cases, and you gotta sometimes weigh what that looks like. But like we talking about molesting children, and that's just a personal thing. Like I think like Kaba said, like eating ice cream, or that's personal. Like you like to get your toes licked or something. You know what I'm saying? It's not the same thing. Like this dude is molesting children. Like we can't. And I hate when people make that, they don't make those distinctions. Same thing when we did that with R. Kelly, like, that's just his personal. No, this dude's making songs about minors, and like that's not cool. And what I'm saying, we can't have a culture if we just allow that to happen. Like we can't be out here promoting that culture and just being like that's fine. So no, I never rock with that statement. I don't. KRS-One is an interesting character. I don't want to go in on him, but I've learned a lot from him, but also sometimes I don't really know what he's talking about. And in this particular case, I just can't get with that, man.
Yeah. And I think it's an extension of this, like, I'm minding my business kind of culture that people have. And at the end of the day, man, we should consider each other's business. I mean, not to get deep into like your personal, like we talked about before, but I think certain things, when we start talking about community and we start talking about our children in particular, I think there are certain lines that need to be drawn. And yeah, I know some people who are grimy. I got family members who are grimy, but there are certain things that people do where they just got to be cut off and they got to be called out. you know, and I think that's definitely one of those things.
I did think that if I was just Ice, I might have felt a kind of way. Like, you're going to put me in a category with what Bam is accused of. Like the warrant I might have is for, you know what I'm saying? You know, I don't know, a gun or
wouldn't cut him off for that.
Or,
we wouldn't cut him off for that. Yeah, we wouldn't cut him off for that.
You know, don't. And I'm not, just for the record, I'm not talking about me. I'm saying just Ice might have been saying, you know, like whatever his warrant was, you know, whatever he's, you know what I'm saying, whatever he was dealing with, or whatever anyone else might be dealing with is oftentimes, hopefully, not that. The one piece though that I have to say resonated with me was that the trajectory KRS was pointing to in terms of what segment of the community he's working with on a daily basis, or that he's engaging on a daily basis. The rape and molestation piece is, I think, a separate, I think to your points, I don't want to, I think there needs to be, well, like Wu and them said, there's levels to this. There needs to be some distinctions drawn. But there was something about his trajectory that did resonate with me, that he's saying that I'm working with and dealing with people who are in the most aggrieved conditions, who not to justify, and again, I don't want to put those categories, I want to keep these categories separate, but that there was just something in that was resonating with me, because I think a lot of us in the work we do, especially in this virtual era now, are able to do what we are saying is activism or community work without actually dealing with a lot of people in the community, or at the worst ends in terms of material condition community. So anyway, that was all. But yeah. Anyway, I
think you can just on the last point on that. I think you can definitely. Again, that's why I say I understand if you doing any type of serious work, like you said, if you're dealing with people directly in the community, there are definitely like people who have backgrounds that, you know, based on European society, could be looked down upon, you know, it can be disposable, whatever. So yeah, we got to be careful of that, but that doesn't mean you overcorrect to the point where we don't address harm at all. And it's just like, hey man, it's just your personal shit, bro. Like whatever you do, you know what I mean? You kill people, you molest children. It's cool, man. You know, like you can't go that far. You know what I'm saying? Like that's not how this works. Like, nah, bro. we could be respectful and try to work with people and not just throw them to the side. But it ain't just, yeah, man, whatever you do, man, just keep killing niggas. Like, nah, like that's too far. No, nah. Yeah.
There's only been a couple times where I've really been like in a close personal kind of situation with someone who at least I believed had committed murders or something at that level. And even when they were being friendly to me, I was always like, but how like you real comfortable with that life? And I'm like how? So I've always like when people say like what KRS said is, I've always been like, if they're that comfortable behaving that way elsewhere, why? How comfortable can you be in routine association? At a certain point, Kaba, as you said, we have to be willing to cut them off. Thankfully for me, I was just always too corny and uncool, so it was easy for me to drift away. But so I never had tough decisions to make like that. But at the same time, it was like, man, you know, I like a steady association with this person would be really traumatizing, just on a level like I never know, you know, like what am I going to do that's going to, you know what I'm saying? Anyway. Yeah, I just thought that was interesting. The whole conversation was interesting, and I think more to what I'm coming to is Noriega is a fascinating interviewer. I think he's really good. So anyway,
and Cool Herc. I mean, you know, going back to just his response, I thought he was going to play the humble thing and be like, "Well, nah, brother, you know, but Cool Herc was like, "Yo, I'm the father of this shit," you know.
And he played just before that. They played the audio from the phone call, so you hear Cool Herc in the call, and you hear just what Noriega said. I said, "A Godfather," and he let it go, and then he's like, "Nah, I'm the father."
Yeah,
and I was like, "Damn."
Yeah.
And
he's diesel too, so you better not argue with him because he might
be careful,
bury you into the concrete.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, but it was a fascinating conversation and a lot of wild stuff. KRS is a wild figure. I've had the pleasure of sitting in rooms with him for a few hours, once or twice, and it's a ride. It's a ride. It's hard to keep up. So, all right, so let's do this. Let's just do a quick segue and then come back and get into this discussion of the politics of hip hop in this Cuba piece. So let's just do that. Hold on, Rick. Let's just go. I mix what I like. All right, with everybody's permission, this is what I would like to do, just to go back into an older bag for me, just to sort of set where I like to come from with this, and then I want to get to the specifics of Cuba and Too Black, and particularly Too Black, your really strong conversation the other day with the two sisters about what's going on in Cuba and Afro-Cubans and all of that is incredible. But for me, I just want to just go back to some older stuff here that I found that is some of my favorite as well, just in terms of some of the quotes and perspectives here. That when I'm coming to this, I'm looking at that. At hip hop and all cultural production is taking place, broadly speaking, in the context of colonization, whether it's here with Black America or Brown America or whatever, or in the context of Cuba. Certainly, it's more probably obvious there in some cases. But in that context, as Fanon says here, the goal is not that the culture of the colonized be destroyed, but that it in fact be turned, or as he says, fixed in the colonial status. Caught in the yoke of oppression, present and mummified to testify against its members. It's brilliant writing, I think, but his point is you don't kill what the people are doing, you just turn it against them. And then what I tried to do, for years, and even with this needing to be updated video, is to put it in that context, and to show a little bit of the mechanism of how the culture is colonized and turned against. So this definitely needs updating. But basically what I was just showing here is that if you just look at all the popular art, despite even in this digital era where it's presented as freely developed and autonomous and coming from the people, almost all of it is owned by just 2 to maybe 3 companies. And then if you look at those companies and see, who owns them, they're owned by even larger companies who are able to use these newer digital platforms, streaming platforms, to make it seem like something new is happening in the digital environment in terms of the old media. But they're just more easily able to create the popular versions of what we do that support the politics that they prefer be supported. So whether it's conspicuous consumption, just general, whiteness and preferences of whiteness, etc. This part definitely needs to be updated in terms of the owners of these dominant companies, or the faces, I should say, these dominant companies. But it's through their ownership of these what are ultimately products that these international conglomerates and hedge funds and private equity groups can have some of the largest music companies become even just small components of their broader operations. So as we can talk about in a little bit, like, a lot of discussion right now is around Lil Nas X, who, if I saw correctly, comes out on Columbia Records, which is a subsidiary of Universal Music, which is, as I'm going to show in a minute, it used to be a smaller piece of Vivendi, but I just was doing some research this morning and see that Vivendi has been looking to sell it, and that it has become bigger than Vivendi itself. And my point has always been that people own it so that they can control its distribution and what becomes popular, so that the artists that I'm showing here on the screen, from Skip Coon to Moo Fresh to Wise Intelligent to Odyssey to even KRS and Premier, who had a record come out a couple of years ago, to Dead Prez, like artists like this who are still producing good music can be disappeared among the mass of something that is highly and more well promoted and more in with greater sophistication promoted, and owned by private equity groups that themselves, as was shown here, own the prison system. So BlackRock, is owning the music that comes out and also owning the prison systems that are being filled through both the propaganda that says Black people deserve it, or through encouraging young people to engage in what would be criminalized activity and then used as a justification for punishing them and ruining their lives. So I was just trying to argue that historically the COINTELPRO directive of distorting and removing the radicalism of cultural production from young people was played out in hip hop history. So as Davey D and others have shown here, historically, what I was just trying to show here through image is that there was that moment in the late 80s or the mid to late 80s, where hip hop was coming together to talk about, we're not going to rock gold chains, we're going to get out of the diamonds and all of this kind of whatever kind of stuff, and we're going to rock medallions, we're going to rock red, black, and green. And this movement within hip hop was suppressed, and there was Bambaataa showing up. So that was where, another connection to the previous discussion. Anyway, that movement was suppressed by a sort of corporate takeover, by a colonial takeover, by a colonial adjustment, rather, to a colonized population looking to use a cultural expression to free itself or to challenge its colonial status. So just in terms of some of the importance of all of this work through propaganda and psychological warfare, looking at some of the work here of Hannah Arendt, as she said, in order not to overstate the importance of the propaganda lies, one should recall that much more numerous instances in which Hitler was completely sincere and brutally unequivocal in the definition of his movement's true aims, but they were simply not acknowledged by a public unprepared for such consistency, end quote. And one of the points I was just trying to make here in comparison was that if you go back and look at the history of Nazi propaganda, for a good decade or more before the machinery of killing Jews and others was developed, they had been overtly, explicitly saying, this is what we intend to do. Bus kiosks had posters, saying, Jews need to be exterminated, and and we got to get rid of this group and that group, and we got to, but people, by the time it started, people just didn't believe it was really going to happen. They just, just didn't think, or they were like, he's just talking trash, or we have another movement that's going to come and protect us against that, or they're not serious. But in which, but obviously that wasn't the case. And then the same thing for the fathers of the Nazis throughout the continent of Africa. For those who remember Germany's episode of Colonialism in Africa, Vernichtung, I forgive that mispronunciation, or don't, may have evoked memories of the German war of extermination in Namibia in the first decade of the century. In other words, so they had been doing the same thing in Africa and preparing and developing a process that would then be used even within the borders of Europe. And then I just always like this quote, so I'll wrap it up here, this part at least, by saying that, as Fanon said, the settlers' work is to make even dreams of liberty impossible for the native, and the natives' work is to imagine all possible methods for destroying the settler. And part of my argument with reference, don't go chasing waterfalls and all of that, is that the commercial media environment is intentionally constructed to kill our freedom dreams, as Robin Kelly and others have talked about, and to impose on us, some other vision of a world. So within that context, I want to get into the specifics of this Cuban situation, but to stop talking for a minute at least. Too Black, let me ask you, if you would, to give us a quick summary of your discussion that people, if they haven't, should go and see, that you had about the Cuban situation and Afro-Latinos, and then sort of set the context for where you passingly referenced this story about hip hop being created or promoted in Cuba from the United States against the revolution, and then we'll get into all of that. But set some of that context, if you would.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so we did an episode, the Black Myths podcast. It was kind of different than how we normally approach it. We asked a question versus it just being a straight like myth. Because a little backstory was, originally I contacted him actually before Belly of the Beast, before the protest broke out. We were talking about doing something on the revolution. And the myth would have been that the revolution failed Afro-Cubans. That's what we were going to originally talk about. But once the protest broke out, tried to kind of change up where, okay, we need to talk about stuff more recent and we can talk about the revolution. So the question was, did racism in Cuba ignite the July 11th protests? And the origins of that is, there's been a lot of conversation about Afro-Cubans suddenly, especially after that Black Lives Matter statement, saying, and I quote some of the articles in it. Like there's one, I think the guy actually works at your school, the Johnson cat. He did an article in Slate, fear of an Afro-Cuban planet. There was one in Washington Post saying that Afro-Cubans are leading the uprising or something of that nature. There was stuff in the New York Times. So there's been this sudden explosion of conversation about Afro-Cubans, giving the impression that it was almost a racial revolution occurring in Cuba. And this is why all these people are protesting, because it's all these Afro-Cubans who finally had enough of the oppressive, repressive communist regime that hates Black people. And they're using racism as a wedge to somehow support they as in the US, the CIA, the state, the press, etc., is using the racism, quote unquote, against Afro-Cubans as a wedge to say that this is why communism doesn't work. Somehow they never do that over here. When police kill us, it's not a conversation why capitalism doesn't work. But so we brought on Liz Olivia Fernandez, who's a journalist, and she did the documentary War on Cuba with the overall team Belly of the Beast. This was produced by Oliver Stone and Danny Glover, and etc. So she's like the protagonist of this documentary that deals with the blockade, and she's Afro-Cuban, and it's a 3-part documentary that shows why the blockade is strangling the country economically. And that documentary, I believe, was made. The documentary was made before the protest, but it was also made like post-COVID or during COVID. And they talk about how they actually were able to make a vaccine faster than the U.S., but now they can't get syringes. And it talks about how they have electricity, that they have electricity outbreaks, and then how they tried different alternatives, like I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but greenhouse technology essentially, but they can't get the resources imported into the country because of the blockade. And the U.S. is attacking the doctors and saying they're forced labor and so on and so forth. So she just breaks down what actually was happening in the protest, and it wasn't about some racial revolution. She's like, a lot of it is disjointed. She's like, depending on where you go, it's not even that many people. There's not really one coherent ideology that people are like protesting. So some people are counter-revolutionaries, as we're going to discuss with the rap song. Some people are just mad because of the general conditions. There's been other reports done on this. Some people are like anti-state, kind of anarcho type people who really just oppose the government. But then there's also been reports that doesn't get put out, and we didn't mention this in the episode. Well, we kind of did, but not directly, where some people actually don't like some of the reforms that happened in Cuba, that they felt are moving too closely to capitalism. And some people are actually opposing that in their protests. That never gets reported. So some of the openings and some of the certain like liberalizing of the economy is actually what some people are protesting. It's not all just communism. That's what I'm saying. There's no coherent message. So she breaks down that it's not a racial revolution. It's not based on racism. That's not why people are doing it. Of course, racism is always there, and because of the colonial history and the slavery and some of the failures of the government, in certain pockets, that's there, and Afro-Cubans are at the bottom in many cases. A lot of that was exacerbated by a special period, which is because they didn't have a trade partner. But that's not why people are protesting. So this whole Said Idrissa movement and the rap song, I was like, we have to question if that's what's being promoted, and we know it's being funded by the CIA, which we're going to get to, the National Endowment of Democracy and so forth. We need to question what that really means and whether that's actually it. And I think the last line I said in my opening monologue is, it's not that these issues don't exist, whether there's tensions or racism, etc., but I said the investigation lies on where that gets funneled, to your point. Like, so when we take these tensions, but how do they get funneled? So, and as we're going to talk about, the states trying to exploit that. And our breakdown, or in our interview, she just really systematically debunks that this is why this is happening. She talks about the lady who actually saw in real life that the UN tweeted out, I believe, was an anti-protester who was holding a Cuban flag, and she was actually a pro-government protester.
Right.
But they're trying to use Afro-Cubans. And then there's plenty of Afro-Cubans who are actually trying to improve the revolution, who say it needs to be more anti-racist, who say it needs to be more, anti-sexist. They're trying to improve the revolution, as opposed to just saying, let's let the US in and let's act like the blockade ain't a thing. But racism is the distraction to not talk about the blockade. And now they're trying to say we need to have a nuanced conversation, right, about racism and the blockade, as if the blockade doesn't actually fuel whatever the racism is that Afro-Cubans are experiencing, and it's not going to help if you keep that blockade going. So that's essentially what we got into. There's more, but watch the episode. Yeah.
No, people should definitely watch the episode, and it's dope that you also had it in English and Spanish with the translator working with you all, which was very dope. But so this is exactly why I have for a long time wanted to argue that, or I should say, add myself to those who are already long arguing in a variety of ways that pop culture is political, that this is beyond questions of entertainment. This is beyond questions of choice and individual. This whole thing of what we get is what we want, and if we want it, if we the people wanted a different kind of hip hop, we would have it, and if we wanted a different kind of world, we would have it. As if there aren't forces acting against that desire or those tendencies, and that it's that these, as others have pointed out or described them, these are there's pop culture is a battleground or a war of images. So it makes it easier to then understand not only why would major corporations want to get involved in at least here in the United States, or really around the world, and owning that the popular culture and owning the mechanisms that promote it. And if we have time, or we can come back to it, or maybe work it in later, I have prepared a couple points on showing this process and how it works even today. That in other words, that there is still a process of signing away ownership of the art to these corporations by artists, who then are able to engage in processes of modern day payola or pay for play. And have that art promoted on all these streaming platforms, which are themselves owned by a handful of consolidated, conglomerates and private equity groups, and that their interests would be beyond financial in promoting a version of popular culture and art from among the colonized that reflects a certain kind of politics, that reflects a certain worldview. So then by the time that we get to this story, which I think is a very good one, from Max Blumenthal in The Gray Zone, about Cuba's cultural counter-revolution, U.S. government-backed rappers, artists gain fame as catalysts for current unrest. There are a number of very interesting things that work as both a supplement to what I'm saying and what you've just said and what you all just did with the two the Black Myths podcast. And I'm going to start a little bit out of order because in this article they get to a lot, but specifically they talk about there's an entire section here on the Afro-Cuban population, a forgotten group of people. Afro-Cuban protest captivates U.S. media, but it's shown that this is a result of U.S. corporate media seizing on images of Afro-Cuban protesters to paint the demonstrations as an expression of explicitly racialized discontent.
Which is a myth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But because this is all being sponsored by, as you were just talking about, the National Endowment for Democracy, which was established under the watch of the former CIA Director William Casey to provide support to opposition activists and media outlets wherever the U.S. has sought regime change. I mean, that's exactly why the NED was created by a former CIA director. And then going on says, quote, a lot of what we do today was done covertly 25 years ago by the CEA. NED co-founder Alan Weinstein told journalist David Ignatius, who celebrated the organization as the sugar daddy of overt operations. Wow. Like, damn, look at how they. So, I mean, so I just wanted to start there to then go back and work our way through this piece maybe a little more carefully and get your thoughts. And I'll ask for them even starting right there, right now. But I just thought that was a fascinating place to go, given where you all sort of left off with where I interpreted where you left off with the Black Myths, and where we can pick up, with this thread here that it is overtly a design of an institution founded by a former CIA director with the goal of providing support to opposition activists and media outlets wherever the U.S. has sought regime change. So this story about Cuban hip hop is sort of the perfect marriage of supporting activists and media that would promote what for them would be a positive regime change out of socialism and communism, and towards more pro-capital and, of course, U.S. capital dominance. So then either of you have anything you wanted to jump in with at this point?
Well, I'll just quickly say it's just more of the same. And we know, of course, if they do that in Cuba and other countries, certainly they do the same thing here, to your point that you were making when you started this particular part of the conversation. Is that everything that's in mass media is always is controlled, and in dominant media it is controlled, and it is not arbitrary. It is done for a purpose, which is why you can go to any particular city and hear the same 7 to 9 songs every single hour, on the hour, sometimes at least every hour and a half or so. It's all a part of programming in the loose sense and also in the more strict sense.
That's right. And to the point I was trying to get at, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that to the point I was trying to get at earlier is that when you're talking about radio in a quote unquote traditional radio sense, for instance, a lot of the students I have in the classroom will somehow think that does not apply to their media or more modern media environment. But it is exactly the same thing. If you look at YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, if you look at how these operations work, all of what dominates the streams there is paid for literally through the same pay-for-play operations that funded and still fund radio, and they're all, coincidentally or not, owned. That is, the music is all owned by these same 2 or 3 companies: UMG, Sony Music, and Warner Music Group. There's almost no exception to that, even today. So, and then, as I like to point out, Lear Cohen, or Liar Cohen, is people used to like to say about him in the hip hop world, is still running YouTube Music. He's running the biggest music platform in the modern era, and we're supposed to think that digital media has somehow meant a real change. It's just given them greater control is really what it's done. Anyway, sorry, Too Black. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say the song, first of all, that inspired all of this so-called protest was recorded in Miami, So I just think that's an important point to make.
That's basically Cuba.
It wasn't even recorded in Cuba. So we just need to remember that. And if we know what Miami actually is in reference to Cuba, and I'm gonna just be blunt on this, with a lot of the terrible people that were in Cuba, went to Miami when Castro, got in office. So after the revolution. So we should also just have that context, that this is Miami was also after, once the revolution, even before it was over, but even, shortly after it was finished, or at least they after they had overthrown Batista, this is where they trained a lot of counter-revolutionaries at the time, to try to come back into Cuba and take over. It failed. Batista's counter-revolutionaries didn't work, but then they continued to train more that would go back into the country of Cuba and try to, overthrow, whether it was violently, whether it was culturally of some form. That's the history of that. So I just think people need to remember that part of it. So a song that was made in Miami, funded by the CIA, is just, as Brother Kava said, that's a continuation of the same thing. So I think we just got to remember that part too. Like, this is not an organic song in many ways. This is being portrayed. And then, as Liz said on our episode, a lot of the people, some of the people that were protesting these neighborhoods she was basically saying, essentially, the way we would understand it here, it's like if people from the suburbs went to the hood and led protests. So you had a lot of that going on too. So, that's just tip of the iceberg. But yeah, like, I just want to keep emphasizing, this is not an organic thing.
And in that vein, the continuation of that, is it preys upon young people, because even though in this particular instance and others, these people are contrived specifically by the CIA in this particular case, what happens is they become popular, to Dr. Ball's point, and then people who are not necessarily curated by the CIA, who are impressionable and young and want to be successful as well, they then emulate these things, and then they become unwitting supporters and spreaders of the CIA virus, so to speak.
Right.
The CIA virus.
And we were talking about the what's the not the National Endowment, but the U.S. Agency of International Development. Like, I think within a week when that song came out, the leader of that group, or leader of that CIA front, tweeted the song out. So
wow.
within a week of the song coming, like, it's in the article. So I'm saying again, you gotta, this isn't organic. Like, a song made in Cuba is then tweeted out by someone in who's in the US working for a CIA front, right? That gets tweeted out. And similarly with the protests themselves, the first like SOS Cuba tweets were in Spain. They weren't in Cuba,
Wow.
So they were in Spain, and Spain is also involved. We're talking about colonial relationships. Spain is also involved because remember, this was their colony before the U.S. took it from them in the U.S. Spanish-American or the Spanish-American War. This was their colony, so they're still trying to get it back too. So they're involved in their own covert operations as well. And then a lot of people in Miami is who pushed out these tweets, and then there's evidence that some of these tweets have just been bots. This whole SOS Cuba. So again, none of this is organic, but once it gets put out there, it can latch itself on to things that are organic, certain real grievances that people have, and then it just takes off. And at that point, you've kind of lost control of it.
Yeah.
So I mean, I just even like how this article starts by showing just very clearly, it says, my people need Europe to point out the abuser. You tell us a Spain-based Cuban rapper, as you pointed out, proclaimed in an EU Parliament event convened by right-wing legislators before handing the mic over to none other than Venezuelan coup leader Juan Guaido. And then days later, you tell held a Zoom call with State Department officials to discuss Patria y Vida, the anti-communist rap anthem he helped author. And then they go on to explain that Patria y Vida meant to replace patria or muerte. What is that? Freedom from or freedom in life, or freedom from, or as opposed to freedom or death.
You better get it right, man. How you gonna be married to a Panamanian? You should at least have
you know
some
what I'm
basic
saying?
to it,
Hey, you know what I'm
you
saying?
better get it right.
You know what I'm saying?
Because I can't help you.
So let me tell you, now that you dragging out my personal here, there was a moment in Two Blacks, where Two Blacks said, when you were having your conversation on your last show, and took a shot at those of us who don't know, who haven't learned another language, and I took a little offense.
I haven't either. I would just say, don't,
because you was like, we got to grow up and get mature. And my point is, even when you live with Spanish speakers, if you're not raised in it, for some of us, it's very difficult, man. Even with a language like that, so it's supposed to be relatively easy. I have had not the easiest time at all. My children are fluent. Everybody's fluent around me, but I'm not.
And there's some of that's my fault. It's a certain cultural context, just like if we have our own nuances in the language as Black people. We speak a certain kind of way. We speak idiomatically. And there's certain idioms all over in the language that we just insert into the language, whatever it is. Black people will always insert that. I remember when I was living in Panama, and I knew this guy, friend of mine. He was a Puerto Rican guy, and he was saying how, and I was saying, well, I just thought it was all Spanish. He was like, no, it's totally different. It's a different accent, and they got a whole different way of just putting words together. It's just a whole different thing.
Yeah, I mean, even our translator at times I cut a lot of that out, but she had to clarify because she's like, I think has more of a Mexican background, so there's different there's a different twist in the Spanish, so even for somebody who spoke it fluently, there were some times they had to clean it up. All I was saying was, I know certain people will tune in when they hear Spanish, they're just like, I'm not watching this, or they don't want to watch captions, and that's just a very American thing. When a lot of places, other places in the world, people speak multiple languages like it's nothing, but for whatever reason,
but they're raised in that from jump. From those of us who are exposed to the ravages of the U.S. educational system, they don't do that. So that's all I was. Anyway, I'll just mess with you. But yeah, my Spanish is not where it should be. And it is what it is. But so yes, so thanks to Brother Hiram. And I knew I could just jump in the chat real quick and get it straight and jump back out. So I'm not staying. So I'm just so the rest of the crew know, I'm adhering to my banishment. But I just wanted to jump in real quick, get the correction, and jump back out. Anyway, so but the point was that they were making a play on the freedom call originally.
Real quick, I do want to add a little bit more context.
Go ahead.
I think this was in the article, or I might have taken it from somebody. The slogan was an over twist of I'm talking about the original slogan, which was uttered by Fidel Castro at a memorial for dock workers killed by the CIA's deadly sabotage of La Cobre freighter in Havana Harbor in 1960. So again, we have the CIA, just to give more context.
Yep. That's it from this article too. Yep. Right. Yep. And there's the text from Patria Muerte, which was first uttered. Yep. Exactly. They also let's see. Where was I going next with that? But the article I thought also did a good job. Let me see. Let me get up to this point here of talking about. First of all, this article is very long and very thorough. So shout out to Max Blumenthal for all that thoroughness. But this is where I'm. I can't fully. I haven't fully. Wait. I haven't fully fasted from my Black August petty fast. But check this out. So this is what I meant to say. This is what I wanted to get to very quickly in this. Just as a quick side note. So forgive me, fellas, for dragging you into my pettiness here with this. But this paragraph right here is what frustrates me about folks like Max and these folks at the Gray Zone. By basing itself in a largely Afro-Cuban area of old Havana and working through mediums like hip-hop, San Isidro has also maneuvered to upend the racially progressive image Cuba's leftist government earned through its historically military campaign against against apartheid South Africa and the asylum it offered to Black American dissidents. And I'm sorry, when I read this, I'm like, why are they describing without naming Black American dissidents? Who were they? One of them recently passed. One of them is still alive with a bounty on her head. That is not named in this article, or if I'm not mistaken, anywhere else in the Gray Zone's work. And there's no reference not only to Asada or Nahanda or anyone else, but to any of the political prisoners that still exist that are also coming out of that same Black American dissident history. So my point is that in an article that is criticizing the abuse of the state and the right-wing Cubans of the history of Afro-Cubans and racial discrimination in Cuba, Max and them are doing a kind of a left-wing progressive version of that by making an allusion to by noting Cuba's radical relationship to Black liberation struggles here and around the world, but saying almost nothing about their continuing struggle or the people that are still locked up as a result. So they don't, that's what I'm saying. So when all this brilliant coverage and in-depth writing about this Cuban rap thing, there is not anywhere near that level of reporting or coverage of Mumia, of Mutulu, of Sundiata, of Asada herself, or those related politics. So forgive that little detour, but I couldn't help. I just, when I read that paragraph, I was like, damn, man. I was like, come on, man. And then in a related article written by Aaron Mate for the Gray Zone recently, where they go into Cuba's radical history very importantly, they cover so much of Cuba's involvement in African liberation struggles starting right 2 years after their own revolution. They were already in Africa fighting for Algerians and everybody else. So it just is frustrating that when I see this and they don't have anything to say for those political prisoners, but and it would be helpful if they did, anyway. So right. All right, that was it for that part. And feel free to, or not, or whatever.
Well, I think it just, I don't think it's petty. I think it's just you just being particular, and I think that's important to point out that even though, and you and I have talked about the fact that we check out the Gray Zone and other outlets like that. It's just important to have our own voice in the midst of all this. Even that's right. Even with people that with whom we would generally agree or draw information from, we still have to. We still have to be analytical and point out the flaws that they have as well, because, they're not going to see the world the way we see it, even though they may see certain things similarly. It's important that we see it through our eyes and having platforms like this one. So I think it's important to always point that out, because it stresses the fact that, because sometimes people will get seduced by the fact, well, I agree with this and I agree with this and I agree with this and I agree, and just kind of overlook certain things. But I think that can actually make it more dangerous, when it comes to leaving out these very important facts, because, at the end of the day, some of these people like Democracy Now! And them, they only highlight the people that they know are absolutely innocent of the so-called crimes. But as we've discussed before, some of the things that these people may call crimes, we might just be calling, acts of revolution and overturning an evil system. So I might not necessarily have a problem with them robbing a bank or offing a pig or something like that. I mean, it's just whatever.
It's still my favorite interview with DaBaby, where he said he went in on Angela Davis and Amy Goodman and was saying, because Angela had said something about Asada's innocence, and DaBaby was like, don't demean her work by saying she was innocent. She knew what she was doing. She knew why she was in that car. She was trained. He said Asada was a better shot than me. he was like, you don't know, like, don't demean them by claiming their innocence, just because you see it as a tactic to get the state off their back, especially if that's not what they're saying about their actions. Anyway, it was a controversial thing, and it got me in a little bit of trouble with the folks I was working with at the time, but it was still one of my favorite things that he said. But anyway, yeah, go ahead. My bad. Go ahead.
No, I'm not accusing the gray zone of this directly, but I think sometimes in general within white leftist spaces, it's interesting based on our conversation. We're talking about Afro-Cubans get used kind of as a straw man in many cases, or as a token, or as some type of plot for a bigger goal. I think sometimes our own revolutionaries within the states just get used as a way to push just a general white leftist agenda, and they don't really recognize the specificity and the sophistication of who these people are and the struggles that they come from. And so it's easy to just gloss over it and reference it when it fits a particular agenda, within a white leftist frame, but not necessarily give it the credit that it's due. I think that is a general problem that we have when we're dealing with some of these folks. So,
as Sam Jackson said, "Yeah, I did it, and I hope they burn in hell."
Right on. And fellas, listen, I got a couple more pieces from this article that I wanted to draw from, but at any point that I don't get to something you wanted to get to in it, or if I don't, get to the specific points, please make that known. And to everybody else, if you haven't seen already, this and several other articles are linked in the show notes to this show. We may add some more by the end, but because this article deserves a close read. I mean, it's fascinating and revealing. In fact, this very next line that I thought was another important point, just to quickly point out that the U.S. government has spent millions of dollars to cultivate anti-government Cuban rappers, rock musicians, artists, journalists in an explicit bid to weaponize, desocialize and marginalize youth. And this is where they start to specifically target Afro-Cubans, because of course when you start talking about desocialized or marginalized groups, that's of course anywhere you go is the Black population. And as they say here, as this investigation will reveal, leading members of the San Isidro movement have raked in funding from regime change outfits like the National Endowment for Democracy and U.S. Agency for International Development while meeting with State Department officials, U.S. Embassy staff in Havana, right-wing European parliamentarians, and Latin American coup leaders from Venezuela's Guaido to OAS Secretary General Luis Almagro. So this is a high-powered operation, and millions of dollars, which I thought also was interesting during our pandemic here, that has been, while U.S. citizens get nothing, our tax dollars are being used to the millions to create art to destroy socialized environments elsewhere. I mean, it's just deep.
But I'm sure Uncle Joe is not doing that, brother. I'm sure Uncle Joe he's not down with that program, right?
Uncle Joe can't be down with that program.
Yeah, he can't be down with that because
No.
There was that was another piece I was just reading in concert with this. It was in Mint Press. It was called "The Bay of Tweets." Documents point to U.S. hand in Cuba protests, and it had a portion in there that was saying it goes well with this part. The House of Appropriations budget published earlier this month, and this article was written in July, also sets aside up to $20 million for democracy programs in Cuba. Democracy programs, including those that support free enterprise and private business organizations. And it says, what is meant by democracy is made clear in the document, which states in no certain terms that none of the funds made available under such paragraph may be used for assistance for the government of Cuba, right? So they're explicitly funding these programs that are separate, and we talked about tied to Miami, just tied to the general state, and democracy, so they can ultimately promote the overthrow. And that's all this is ultimately about, is trying to overthrow the country, the communist government, as they like to call it, but $20 million. This is just earlier this month. They just put this out, technically before the protest, right? So yeah, it's hilarious.
And as they say here, I mean, as Blumenthal says here, the goal is to transform Cuba into a colony for multinational corporations, which of course the Cuban Revolution targeted specifically, that is U.S. corporations, et cetera, for removal. So I mean, it's wild. And then there's so much more here, but including this little bit here. Let's see, where had I put this is okay. For its part, we went through that part already. So I wanted to get here because they talk about a 2009 paper in the Journal of Democracy, the official organ of the NED, outlined the ambitious blueprint for cultivating Cuba's post-Cold War underclass as an anti-government vanguard, using the principles of democracy and human rights to unite and mobilize this vast dispossessed majority in the face of highly repressive regime is the key to peaceful change, wrote Carl Gershman and Orlando Gutierrez. And then they talk a little bit, as Blumenthal talks a little bit about who Gershman and Gutierrez are, and describes them as influential figures in the world of overt regime change operators. The founding director of NED, Gershman, presided for 4 decades over U.S. efforts to destabilize governments from Managua to Moscow. Gutierrez, for his part, is an outspoken advocate of a U.S. military invasion of Cuba, who serves as National Secretary of USAID and the NED-funded Cuban Democratic Directorate. And then a point that I really wanted to highlight here is this one, speaking to sort of what we were just talking about and where I started. These two regime change specialists pointed to music and online media as ideal vehicles for harnessing the frustrations of Cuban youth. The alienation of the young reaches into mainstream and expresses itself in the angry lyrics of rock musicians, the bloggers' depictions of the frustrations and tawdriness of everyday life, the frequent evasion of agricultural work, voluntary service, and neighborhood committee meetings, and the general disengagement from politics that is the fruit of a half-century of coerced participation in force-fed political propaganda, they wrote. My point in bringing this up is that this, again, says a number of different things. One, it speaks to what we don't, I think, have enough of appreciation of here, or were encouraged away from, propagandized away from, our understanding and appreciation for the politics, again, of pop culture, and how those in power view, from their perspective, the role of popular culture, in this case, music, and then again, this issue of online or our digital media environment, that for their purposes, it is a greater mechanism and weapon to do what they want to do, as opposed to what we're promoted as, we're encouraged to believe, as the online as a space to create the radical change that we want to see. And we all, we create our shows, we do our blogs, we do our tweets, and too many of us are encouraged to think of that as our contribution to radical revolutionary change. And this is, I think, one of the, another reason why we keep lagging and failing to catch up. We're not clearly aware, that is from the perspective of those in power, how this stuff is to be used and why it's arranged as it is. That is, in this case, popular culture or our favorite artists. Anyway, there's so much more I thought was fascinating here. In 2009, USAID initiated a program to spark a youth movement against Cuba's government by cultivating and promoting local hip hop artists. So this is where they go into a more detailed explanation of how, for a long time, this has been sort of attempted and cultivated. I believe they go through the 2014 app creation. I think that was in this story.
Yeah, but even look at that.
Yeah, go ahead.
That second paragraph.
No, sure, go ahead.
It's because of a long history as the CIA fronts. USAID outsourced the operation to Creative Associates International. So they
just flipped it.
Yeah, they're like, okay, we've been found out, so let's pay somebody else to do the same shit.
And then instead of CIA, it's CAI. Creative
right.
International. So they're just like, they're like fucking with us. It's like, and then they go into other stuff. So like when we start talking about, for instance, John Potash's work, and Alex Constantine and others who have been looking into the relationship of the state and the music industry. I mean, it says right here, posing as a music promoter, this guy Rajic Bozic, who was a veteran of the CIA-backed OPTOR group that helped topple Milosevic what is that? The former Yugoslavia? So when that former Yugoslavia? Yugoslavia, whatever. Anyway, posing as a music promoter, he approached a Cuban rap group called Los Aldeanos that was known for its ferociously anti-government anthem "Rap is War." So anyway, I mean, my point is they have people posing as music promoters to promote various groups over others, anyway.
They created their own social media. The part on Twitter, right? They created their own social media because at the time, it's in 2009, the Cubans don't have this open access to social media.
That's
in the
right.
Government. It later states that I think it's not until 2018 that they actually get 3G, where people can get on their phones and such of that nature. But they originally tried to create, it was like, what was it called? Zumono or something like that. They created their own. The CIA created its own social media that I think got up to about. It says in the article about up to 40,000 people within the Cuban government or not within the Cuban government, within the Cuban country, excuse me, on the app. So they're trying to. They're trying to cultivate a different consciousness among the population, which festers this idea of, okay, we don't need the government or whatever. So what we already have is the blockade, which is what festers all of this, and then they try to tap into the culture to funnel that that frustration against the Cuban government based upon the blockade that they've placed on, that the U.S. has placed on the government itself. So they work in different factions. To your point earlier, as far as like the cultural part or the part online. Online, you're trying to set a certain pace. Set certain terms, to guide people in a particular direction. But you've already done the material work of placing a blockade on the country, and that's what you use as the base to start the propaganda in the first place. But if you just start online, you're not dealing in the material like directly with people in some form. Your propaganda is not as effective, which I think is something we can learn even when we do stuff online. If we're not engaging people on the ground, then our propaganda is not nearly as effective, whether we're doing shows, podcasts, or anything else.
That's right on. Facts. To your point about 2018 and the shift to getting 3G and all of that into Cuba, the NED's Cuba budget earmarked close to $500,000 for the recruitment of training and anti-government journalists and to establish new media outlets. Another NED grant budgeted funds to promote the inclusion of marginalized populations in Cuban society, to strengthen the network of on-island partners, implying the targeting of Afro-Cubans. The NED has placed a heavy emphasis on infiltrating Cuba's hip-hop scene. In 2018, the U.S. government entity contributed $80,000 to the Cuban Soul Foundation to empower independent artists to produce, perform, and exhibit their work in uncensored community events, and $70,000 to a Colombia-based NGO called Fundación Cartel Urbano for empowering Cuban hip-hop artists as leaders in society. So, again, my point was,
Yep. I'm just making a brief point. Like, there's all these cutouts. Like, so we're gonna, fund this, but all the money, if you follow, it comes back to the same source. But it's all these cutouts. Like, this article was full of so many like random companies. I had to actually make a list so I could like separate.
It's crazy. That was probably a good idea.
Yeah, and it's a continuation of the nonprofit complex that they do here to influence people. I mean, y'all were talking the other day about Nina Turner in the PACs or whatever that they fund, where they may have like 3.7 people or something in it. So they're very thorough in what they do in terms of trying to get and maintain hegemony. They don't leave any stone unturned when it comes to this kind of thing. I did want to ask y'all too in that regard, and I know we're talking about the CIA and USAID. But the State Department also has that program where they have artists going around from here, going around all over the world, you know, as ambassadors for music. And I'm a musician. I know several musicians who've been on those. I haven't, but I know several musicians, and I know you do too, Dr. Ball, who are, you know, otherwise good folks. But I just wanted to know what y'all's thoughts were on that particular Two Black. I know I've heard Jared say it before, but Two Black, what are your thoughts on that?
On artists being sent around the world to do propaganda. Yeah, I mean that
I mean that's a hell of a framing right there, my man.
Yeah, I mean that's
it.
That's all it is. I mean, I think it's just part of the. I mean, there's a long tradition of that. Like we know Louis Armstrong and jazz artists. Yeah, they got sent across the world. You know, when the fight was with Russia. So I think it's the same thing, and I think there's this
to combat Paul Robeson.
Yeah, and I think even particularly now, I would even say even more so than like 2 or 3 years ago, there's been this resurgence with this like obsession of Black American patriotism, but they're trying to like change the way it works. It's not this conservative, just like flag hugging shit. It's like, okay, we built this country. You know, Black people have been here since the beginning. Blah blah blah. You know, and yes, racism is real, but we want our country to be better. And that kind of totes back. I mean, CBS wrote about this in her Black liberalism piece as well. Like that totes back to that idea of Black liberalism or Cold War Black liberalism, as she called it. You seeing that today with we're going to send artists around the world and they're going to talk about, we're going to acknowledge the struggles of racism now. It's not as much like Louis Armstrong where you're going to, you know, we don't even want you to talk about it. Just play your horn. Like you can acknowledge it, but we're working on it, right? Like America can be better. Like and a lot of artists, I think nowadays are getting pouched into that pocket where talk about racism, but only in the context of how the empire can improve itself, you know, and how we can use the past to redeem the present in many ways, because we can always work past that. And now look, we have more Black people. They're on TV. They're doing this around the world. Like, so that propaganda is running heavy right now. And it's really popped off since George Floyd. That's its own counterinsurgency within the states. You know, so that's why I say I think we can see a relationship with what they're doing with Afro-Cubans and even what they do with a lot of our artists and just, you know, Black faces in high places here.
Hey, I mean, you know, I for a long time, I mean, this has been an issue, and I think, you know, I was thinking about it just now. I mean, I think historically, as I get older, looking back, this is one of those classic examples where I think in the past I could have raised this in a better way than I have with certain folks, or attempted to raise it in a different way with certain folks. But you know, because I remember for years I had a problem with the whole idea of hip hop ambassadors and you know, these, you know, because I was always you know, like you know, even just as a question of process, like who from hip hop, you know, made this decision. You know, how does the State Department, how does the government get to determine who are hip hop's ambassadors, and then to what end? So I always thought it was interesting, you know, because I have known a few artists that have had that invitation, and on the one hand, you know, I can only imagine what that must feel like, especially to an artist to be told you're going to be basically given a tour. You go on tour around the world. Who would not want to do that? I've had, you know, one or two artists actually say to me, one in particular said that, you know, sort of to push back against my critique, said, well, you don't know what we do off the record. Like I may be able to do a performance, but then I get to go and build with the people behind the scenes. And my only point was, that's great, but that doesn't mean that your work for the State Department loses its value to them. And it doesn't mean that your private off the record conversations with local activists is going to overturn the damage done by the propagandized message. So for instance, I used to say the same thing, just, you know, for instance, when like Talib and them started doing Coke commercials back in the early 2000s, they were doing Toyota commercials and Common in them, you know, and I always felt uncomfortable, like, if they're supposed to represent this new
and KRS.
and KRS. I mean, you know, they're doing all this stuff, and it's like, but you're supposed to be representing, you know, something else.
Yeah.
And then people would tell me, but by doing these commercials,
the revolution is Sprite, brother.
Exactly. And they would, but the response to me was often, well, they get to spread their message into new corners. And I'm saying, but when you're sponsored by, you know, when Tavis Smiley and them are having conversations about Black economic empowerment, and it's got Wells Fargo and Bank of America and McDonald's and Exxon on the wall behind them, I'm like, that alone devalues the conversation. So anyway, but
I've seen that even because I'm saying this plays out whether we're talking about the State Department internationally, nationally, whether we're talking about commercials, and even locally. So I mean, I see this here in Indianapolis where there's been a lot of money injected into the nonprofit. I'm not going to call out any of my friends, but I'm saying there's been a lot of money injected into the nonprofit, you know, industrial complex, particularly within the arts. And I was just downtown just last night, and they have these bad. I can't help it. They have these bad paintings, you know, where there's like this one painting, I don't remember who did it, and it's like a American flag over the mouth of a Black man. Again, this stuff engenders a certain patriotism that I think there's a new type of patriotism that they're trying to create that I think we need to be careful of, where they'll admit we're going to be critical of our past and we're going to accept it, and we're going to acknowledge racism, but look at what Black people have been able to achieve otherwise. But then these artists get brought in, and these corporations will partner with us, and we get brought into some of these places where they're trying to gentrify a neighborhood, and they need to do some type of placemaking, so they bring us in to perform, right? And so they can beautify the neighborhood, and then they can kick out all the Black people that we're supposed to be representing. So a lot of artists, I've talked to them, we'll lie to ourselves and say, well, you know, we're trying to move it forward, we got to get the bag. But a lot of it is just people chasing grants, and that's all it is. That's all it is. You're chasing grants, you're chasing the bag. It's an opportunity for you, and you tell yourself throughout this process that, hey, you know, I get to say my message or whatever. But as somebody who's done poetry forever, I mean, I could go on stage and literally say fuck America, all of that, and white people they're just like, that was really nice, like I really appreciated that, and they just go back to their gentrified neighborhood.
Thanks for sharing your truth.
Exactly. so art again has to be connected to something more than whatever you just express as an individual artist. I think Rafiki Morris said it great, like the culture is what we do on the day-to-day. The art is just a cultural product. Like when you're whatever you make, that's just a cultural product. And we confuse those things as being the culture itself. And it's not. The culture is what we do and how we relate to people on the day-to-day. And if what
filter, my bad. I was asking what filter Kaba had on to make himself evolve like that on screen. My bad. Sorry about that.
No, it's cool. No, but that's all. I'm just saying, like, we gotta.
I got it from the State Department.
Yeah. Got that NSA filter. I got to get that. I got to download that.
He's logged in through the Zoom State Department right now. So,
my bad, but Too Black, go ahead, man. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just saying, I mean, artists, I've been in these spots and it's not easy. Like, I understand why it's a challenge when you're trying to just get a gig and you're asked, especially nowadays, by some nonprofit or the State Department, depending on what scale you're on, to do these things, and you think it's an opportunity to spread your message, but they've already calculated that in. That's already baked into it. They're already ready for you to say that America sucks and it's hard to be Black. Like that, it doesn't. That's already part of the matrix, so to speak. So we think we're going to say something revolutionary. It's going to change the tide, and it's actually moving it in a whole different direction. So I'm not saying people don't take all these gigs. I'm never tell people what gigs to take or not take, but you need to be honest about what that gig is. That's just for artists. Like, you got to be honest about that.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely, I think with that last point you made was very good, because I think Black's last point, about the criticism in the art, I think that actually, like he said, to the whole point of the agenda, because they will say what a lot of people say whenever we protest or talk about the ills of America. Well, see, but at least he gets to say it in this country. You see, we're actually sending you all the world, schools, everybody, that the democracy works and that we're this and that, and egalitarianism and freedom of speech, and You know, even though they're speaking out against certain injustices and social justice and all of that, it just shows how wonderful we are, because in spite of all of that, we're still supporting them and paying them and all of that. So it actually adds to the propaganda, as the brother said. So yeah, right on.
Absolutely. I mean, I continue to argue that, you know, when you see an artist, just the symbol, and to your point too, Black, about the art with the flag over the face, when you see an artist who is otherwise associated with progressive politics, just even standing next to in an image, in a, you know, a car or a soda or something like that, whatever they say or do outside of that loses value in terms of its political impact. The image alone, the symbol of their association with what is, that alone, I think, wins the day. And that's why so much money is used, or relative to what we would think, for them it's pennies, but so much money is spent to influence this, because of that. You know, so the only thing I wanted to do real quick before we wrap, unless you all have something else, so I'm not rushing you, but I did want to just quickly go through the point I was trying to get at earlier a little bit about how it functions here in the United States. So I may just add these links. I don't have to go through too much of this, but there were a couple of things that I was just trying to look at to get caught up with the latest on the music environment, because I'm admittedly, you know, a little behind on the latest. So as I mentioned earlier, Vivendi is the largest, is the owner of the largest music group in the world, Universal Music Group. But apparently it's been it's looking to sell it off. And what I thought was interesting here was that it says here in this article from the other day that with an estimated enterprise value of $30 billion or 30 billion euros or $41 billion, according to Vivendi, Universal Music Group is worth more than the market value of its own parent company. So I say that for two reasons. One, for me, that's a shift, because when I was more closely involved in looking at this, UMG was only about 16% of Vivendi's overall operation. So I don't know if they've been selling stuff off or selling stuff off in combination with UMG growing. But it also, which it may be in fact the case, because at the time when I was last looking at this 10 some years ago, the argument was still the measurement was still in transition from, you know, CDs and whatnot into digital, you know, full digital streaming and downloading. Now we've sort of, you know, I know there's an uptick in sort of a, you know, old school, you know, flashback into purchases of CDs and albums, but digital downloads and spins or whatever is really the dominant mechanism by now, and it looks like the industry's, what I was suggesting, was correcting itself, that as I had been arguing for a long time, the industry is not going to ultimately lose money. It's going to learn how to monetize the new technology, and they're doing so. Anyway, so I thought that was one thing that was very interesting. Also to point out that the $41 billion, to the point I was just making a minute ago, the $41 billion worth of the company, to me, is secondary to its ability to promote and project what is popular, to dominate the landscape by promoting and allowing whatever artist emerges to be, you know, owned and controlled by them. They determine that. And one of the ways that this happens is, as I was looking at before, let's see. Well, one, I just mentioned, I'll link this one from a couple of years ago. This story was talking about, I think this is 2019. Yeah, August of 2019. If you want to get on the radio, and they also include spins, you got to have about $50,000. And that payola is still the mechanism of the day, that you still have to pay a good amount of money to get. And they go through some of the history of pay for play. I won't go through some of that here. And Elliot Spitzer, who for a time I thought was set up to be brought down because he was exposing all the payola schemes that were still being run in the industry at the time of his sex scandal and demise.
As well as as well as Wall Street.
As well, yeah, well, because in fact, yeah, to your point, all of it to me was connected because it's Wall Street that is ultimately invested in all this, and in fact, I love that you just did that. That's perfect. As I'll get, but anyway, the point is that they show here that payola is still the. I thought there was something I could find very quickly, but maybe not. No, I don't have it. I don't have it set up, so I'll just link this. But the point is, when you get into the streaming and the online stuff, it's basically the same mechanism, and you see the same artists on those spaces that you would see in terrestrial radio. So to your point earlier, Kaba, if you go and look at the playlist from dominant terrestrial radio, and maybe I'll do this for Monday, and you compare it to the what's dominant online, it's the same artists owned by the same companies. So it's clear that whatever the processes are, they're large, to whatever, adjustments, whatever adjustments have been made, it's still basically the same thing. And I'll go a little bit out of order given what Two Black just said, but one of the major buyers looking to make a move on Universal Music Group is in fact a private equity group, Pershing Square Tontine Holdings. And Tontine, is that a reference to the old arrangement where people put money into a pot and the one who survives the longest gets to keep it? I think that's what a tontine is. Especially if my Archer episode watching pays off. But the point is, this is a private equity group worth $4 billion, market cap of $4+ billion, that has investments in all kinds of different industries and is run by William Ackman, looking to buy 10% of the world's biggest record label. And my point in that is in raising this, and this point about Wall Street's involvement, is that the reason that they are involved is because corporations represent the ability for those colonial rulers in today's world to rule in anonymity, to have legal protection, and to just that, to have not only legal anonymity, but to just that, to provide a veneer behind which they can hide and not be exposed. But I think it's also beyond just the idea of making money, that that there is a political purpose here. So the reason that they would want to have investment and the ability to manipulate what becomes popular is from the other side of the looking glass that we were just looking at in Cuba. They want to manipulate in the same way the outcome of the art. Now they can do it here differently because they don't have to, use CIA cutouts, because those same CIA cutouts are all invested in Wall Street and these same corporations. It's the same, it's the same people, it's the same mechanism. And then if people ever go to the Business Roundtable website, you can see how the quote unquote conspiracy is live on tape. They're out front saying, we have put together a business roundtable to represent politically the interests of all the leading companies in the country, many of whom have incestuous relationships with boards of directors, many of whom have investments through private equity and otherwise into all of our popular culture and communicative networks, and then all of whom get together to lobby collectively the political apparatus to protect and manage it. So whatever we may think of Lil Nas X or DaBaby or anyone else, I think it's first important to recognize that all of this is being created and put before us, regardless of their talent, no disrespect to the talent, by an apparatus that wants this to be the dominant conversation. Or the dominant conversation. For instance, well, in terms of what you were just even saying, I think Two Black a minute ago about this recent, beef between, the controversy created by the comments of DaBaby, is that yes, there is this I think justifiable and righteous movement of those within the LGBTQIA community to want to express and come out from behind this and to be free and to do all of that. while that's going on, there is also an attempt by the state to manipulate, intervene, cause confusion, misdirection, and to stir that projection into very conservative ways. So I don't know enough about Lil Nas X to say that he's part of that particular, but in general, that I would think that that's very much part of the project. So, for real? A segment of this population so you want to get free and be word. We support that. Now go be free in this way. Go be free like this. You want to rap? Fine. You rap against the revolution in Cuba, and you rap, for conspicuous consumption here in the United States, and so on and so forth. And if you want to have conversations in your community about gender and sexuality, you're going to have it in this context, and not that not in another context. So anyway, let me stop there for at least a second. Go ahead. Yeah, please.
Yeah, the framework is always how they get you. So they set a framework that always routes you back to just maybe a liberal discourse about identity or expression. I'm talking about within the arts. This really is how it works. And you just want to be able to just be yourself or something. That's usually how it gets like routed back in the arts. So we don't ever get to talk about the larger structures, or even when we do, it's just word salad, but it still usually comes back to just freedom and this very abstract thing, right? Like that's how you see it every time. And then with I think this is a good opportunity to just really like point out, like when people say the state, like this is really what we mean as opposed to just the government, because as we've been talking about the whole episode, the state serves the entire capitalist apparatus. And so you have the government and the private sector all working together to serve that agenda, right? So a Lil Nas X, it doesn't matter whether this dude is an agent or not. Like, I don't even care about those questions, or whether any of these artists are agents. It's just like they get caught up within the framework because there's an entire apparatus that's feeding a particular trajectory in a way that we should respond to stuff. And so it doesn't become about like actual liberation for Black LGBT community. It just becomes a thing of Lil Nas can express himself. And even that celebrity framework, I think Erica Keynes talks about, celebrity-centered analysis. So even that framework in and of itself just reduces it down to the celebrities and what they're going through. And we somehow live through these celebrities, hoping that it'll trickle down to us, and it never does, right? So it's like, so Lil Nas X is able to be more expressive in his sexuality probably than most Black folks of the same sexuality in much lower economic statuses. They don't get to do that. You know what I mean? So it's like, so even the emphasis on rappers and the emphasis on celebrities as if they're reflective of our daily realities is still part of that overall way that the state works to push all of our ambitions and stuff onto them. And when somehow we're supposed to live through them, like that is its own operation of the state itself.
How about that?
That's where I think that term celebrity-centered analysis is so important, because we can't even get to our own conditions because we're stuck on, Rihanna's a billionaire or whatever, and that shit really doesn't have anything to do with us, right? So I'm saying, like, so instead of us talking about, even come back to Lil Nas X and DaBaby, instead of us really dealing with homophobia, how it plays out on a day-to-day scale, we're just talking about it with celebrities, and we'll debate it on Facebook or in social media or whatever, but we're not dealing with how it actually works in our day-to-day lives because we're just going to live it through with celebrities. And that, I think, is very much something that capitalism has adjusted to, is, we can just make every social issue about a celebrity and nothing really changes because Lil Nas X is going to be cool anyway. Whether you hate him or love him, you're going to like Lil Nas X. Like, he's going to make his money, and the label he belongs to is going to make their money, right? So it's like, they're not really hurting, but like that becomes the way the conversation gets pushed, So even with Cuba, it's like, okay, some Trump supporting artists, right? When we're talking about in this Idrissa movement or whatever, who don't even actually like stay in Cuba like that, become the leaders of a movement. You know what I'm saying? So it's like,
kind of like Juan Guaido.
Yeah, and it talked about in the article where they talked about it was artists in Cuba who were the state sponsored artists, as they say, or whatever, who had been approved by Cuba, and they went to Cuba to they didn't want to like overthrow the government or anything. They were like, yo, can we work through the freedom of expression and having ability to speak out? They wanted to work with the government to figure that out. And he highlights that they didn't even get any conversation in the mainstream press. They don't even deal with those artists. They just highlight the artists who really aren't even Cubans at this point, you know? So it's like, again, pushing things on to the celebrities and onto very selected celebrities is always part of the propaganda machine. That's why I just get tired of even talking about them, because it's like they're not really dealing with the day-to-day.
Yeah, I think these people are representations, and I think to your point about the shaping narratives, you know, people don't necessarily have to think about things when the narrative is shaped, because it's already thought for them. Or at the very, you know, for instance, you know, a lot of people will read they'll read the title of an article, which kind of summarizes a particular narrative without actually going into the details of the narrative, and they think they understand, you know, what they're reading because they're scrolling, and people just don't have the attention span now to actually go deep and go into things to try to figure out the nuts and bolts and how it works. So it kind of works very well for those in power to have this narrative framework, because what happens is people start projecting their own values and their own meanings upon these things. For instance, hope and change. We might have heard of that in the past several years. And whatever that means, it doesn't mean anything.
Hey, that was the realest shit ever. I don't appreciate you talking bad about that. That was the realest shit ever.
Yeah, and we just won't play the Heru poem and get you in trouble like they did. I remember those days when you got in trouble. I was like, wow, that was crazy.
That September Severus poem, I promise you, those lines never lit up for me like that, ever.
Yeah.
Ever. And we brought heavy hitters on the air, and people didn't call like that. And as soon as that played, I couldn't even take it. I was like, "Oh my goodness!"
But again, to the point. This is somebody nobody even heard of. Nobody even knew about him. But because he was given the green light by the state, he was given the green light by those in power. All of a sudden, a person that we didn't know who couldn't even win a congressional seat in his home, well, not his even hometown, but the town that he was calling his hometown, that people didn't even know who he was there. All of a sudden. Once he was given the green light, then he was all right. And we projected all of the hopes and dreams, again, this projection, the narrative, all of that onto him. And so any attack on him was an attack on us, an attack on our history, while at the same time, where you can't really ask him of anything, because we really didn't want anything other than to be recognized and to live vicariously through a particular symbol, which is empty at that. So that's kind of like, you know, all of that in a nutshell.
So the reason I have this pulled up here from the YouTube music charts, just to actually extend the point you both just made, or some of the points you just made, is that all of these artists that you see here on YouTube's, you know, chart leading whatever. I was just looking up at least some of them. They're all on the again, the same labels own all of this, and YouTube is now run by Lear Cohen. YouTube Music is run by Lear Cohen, the same dude that was, you know, a thorn in the side of hip hop forever, Def Jam and all of that, and someone who is now running the what is today the biggest platform or outlet for music. And you know, Bad Bunny, he's big in my household. He's a UMG, you know, product. Kodak Black is Warner.
Now, Bad Bunny, is that your favorite artist, or is that
no, my children. This is what I'm saying. I have, you know, all that boom, ding, ding, ding. It's like I don't know. It's what is it, like trap and whisper rap?
I never even heard of him.
In trap and whisper Latino reggaeton stuff. It's
okay.
It's and he does, you know, he's known for his he makes that noise, you know, it's anyway, whatever. But it's this, you know, Lil Nas X, Universal Music, and so on and so on. And then when you just, you know, as I had done before, I was just looking up, you know, some of the latest you know, and you got like this guy. He runs Sony Music, Rob Stringer. You got who's now running, you got Stephen Cooper, who runs Warner Music. This is who's determining. I mean, come on now. Like, that's like he's in charge of making all these people famous. Again, this is not a statement of their talent. It's not a statement. I'm not even criticizing their art. I'm not even thinking about anything that they're saying or doing. I'm just trying to make the point about who is actually in control or determines that they get to be in the middle of all of these conversations. So I think that was all I had. Yeah, I think that's all I had on that. But anyway, so anyway, that was it, man. You know, for the both of you, from my end, I want to just, from my end, I just want. Oh, wait. There was one more. I did have one more. This is the guy, and this might be my favorite one. This might be this is the guy that's in charge. He's the CEO of Vivendi, who is actually in charge of even above, at least currently, Universal Music. This guy, like, and previously, the guy who held this position was said to be the most powerful man in music. So this guy would then have to be the current most powerful man in popular music. And I mean, I'm just, you know, no disrespect, just on the face of it, pun intended, this can't be. This just can't. This is not whole.
Where is Vivendi? Where are they operating out of? Where are they based?
French. They are the French. They are a French company.
So in other words, So in other words, it's an international, cartel. You know, like,
and you know how we feel about France on this channel.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
Fuck France. So, but anyway, but this is, you know, so like these are the folks. So whether it's the NED or the USAID, or whether it's Sony or UMG or Warner or Vivendi, it doesn't really matter. It's the same operation, the same group. They're all funded, and, you know, they all have investments from BlackRock and Vanguard and all these other private equity groups that we can't even identify their membership. It's still, to me, the funniest thing when you try to, at least when I last tried to look up the membership of Vanguard Group, who have investments in everything. It literally says on the page, the members of the Vanguard Group are the members of the Vanguard Group. It was like, if you're not a member, you don't know. It was like, so it says on the membership, the members of the Vanguard Group. It's like, I was like, yeah, that's gangster. But if you own everything, you know.
I think it goes. But you brought up a point, Dr. Ball, earlier about the way that social media and the internet has given this sense of entrepreneurialism that artists have, where we can all just kind of like get in the game in a fair way. And I think it's actually obscured even more so than it used to be maybe 10 years ago, the stuff you just pointed out. Like, it was a little easier because there was a lot of hate on labels and 360 deals. Like, you know, when I was coming up, when I was like in my early 20s, like, people talked about that a little bit. But now that you'd put a song out on the internet and you can stream your music, there's somehow seems to be this disconnect that there are still labels operating behind the scenes. And it's not everybody's this independent entrepreneur. Like, this is a major consequence of neoliberalism, is just pushing this idea that everybody just can get in the game and push their brand, and next thing you know, you're gonna blow up. But even when you start independent, you're always just trying out to be recruited by these companies. That's all it is.
Right,
so
right,
if you build up a little following online or whatever, it's a tryout to say, hey, I have a following, let's do a deal, right? So it's like, let's partner up, whether it's with a label or with a corporation. I'm just performing what I'm doing as kind of a means to an end, so you can bring me on, and now I can, quote unquote, get the bag. Like, that's the new hustle. Used to be they would just sign you straight up. Now you got to go out actually and work on your own money, you know, whatever you hustle, and then maybe we'll come in and like pay for it on the back end if you can get on with whatever we got going on, whether it's a label or consider a corporation or whatever. Like, that's the new thing. And we were talking about earlier with like local artists, that's a way of doing that now, is you do that so you can get recruited by a nonprofit, you know, and you can kind of become their child of their kind of like star that they put on the poster, like, this is our Black artist or whatever. Like, that's the new thing, you know. So that it's a way of disciplining artists now, where you got to go out, make a name, versus they used to develop you, right? And they used to pay for that shit. Now you go out, do it yourself.
You're the A&R now.
Yeah. So it's even
to that
worse
point,
than,
Kaba, when a couple years ago in the School of Journalism, when I was still over there, they had brought in reps to come in and talk to students from Universal Music Group to say, if you want to be in the music industry. So I went to one of the presentations, and it was fascinating. And one of the to your point, they actually said they hire their A&Rs, whose main job is to follow social media and find who's got a buzz and get to them first. So there is no, you used to be in the community, the latest, somebody in the community, somebody at the local party who's got talent, and you bring them up, and and that's how it's cultivated, blah, blah, blah. No, they just go and recruit college kids who are adept at social media and happy to be on a computer all day and a phone all day. You go find somebody. And if that artist can create enough buzz to get the attention of one of these young, college age, A&R reps, they might get a deal. But to your point, and then even broadly speaking, the whole corporate world is like that. The reason Microsoft and Apple own everything is because if somebody bubbles up with a new app or a new toy or a new component, they get bought up. And they all go out to those conferences in Silicon Valley and hope to get bought up. I got an app, please buy me. It's like, and that's colonial extraction. That is the perfect point and a good way, even for us to close on this question. This is how colonialism works. It's beautiful. You go out there and do whatever you want in your little colony up to a point. You go produce all your art, sing your songs, do whatever, make your paintings and write your poetry. And as soon as one of you becomes talented enough and good enough and it has with enough attention, we'll buy you, we'll sign you. And project you to do whatever. Anyway, I mean it's.
Well, I think that speaks to I think that speaks to the problem and the phenomenon of fame. Because in reality, to your point the other day, you're talking about masters and things with Prince and whatnot and Nas. I think that was yesterday y'all talking about that. Artists can make actually probably maybe not more, but a good enough amount of money, just being independent and owning all of your stuff, as opposed to being famous. But so many people are so invested in being famous because of the egotism that's engendered and enhanced and so forth, exacerbated by social media and these brands, which are universal, no pun intended, and are just all over the place. If people get caught up in the fame, and I forget which one of the rappers, I think it was Talib Kweli, who, by the way, who said, give me the money, fuck the fame, or something like that. In one of his songs, Thieves in the Night, I think that's what it was. But and then that was before he got the commercial for the soda, of course. But the bottom line is that people get so caught up with the fame, that they don't even really care as much about the bag, which even though they say they care about the bag, but they care about the bag in addition to the fame, it's just a crazy situation. And then also another point real quick. I know we're trying to close out.
No, it's cool.
But Prince, with this whole thing with the internet, going back to Prince again, he was one of the people that revolutionized this whole thing of selling on the internet at first. And at first he was called crazy for doing it. And now all of a sudden, now the people that called him crazy, the industry, because they didn't have, a footprint there, just like they didn't have a footprint per se with this cryptocurrency. Now they're starting to, then they started taking over, just like they do with cryptocurrency now.
I mean, it's just interesting. Prince was always in a very unique position. I mean, and that was one of the good and the bad from what he was doing. That on the one hand, he was at the end of his career promoting the accuracy of the industry and encouraging a certain relationship to it. But often I thought that got left out of the conversation was the fact that he had been already given enormous fame, not only due to his one-of-a-kind talent, but because he had been pushed by an industry for so long. So he had gotten to a point where his fame could be used to his benefit, unlike, I think, and put him in a situation most artists would never be in. I mean, when we went, I remember on the musicology tour, I went to go see the show, and we got his copy of the album as part of the ticket for the show. That's how he was distributing that album, because he wasn't going through. But that's Prince, you know what I'm saying? Like you're selling out arenas and stadiums all over the world. And if you can do that, then hell yeah, you can sell your album that way and have it probably do very well. But most artists can't do that. So it was both the sort of the I don't know. the paradox of his situation. But
that's why I think cooperatives. I know it's kind of lagging a little bit, but that's why I think that artist cooperatives are essential here, because just like we talk about co-ops and cooperatives in other ways, you know, artists that can also benefit from those kind of deals as well, working together. You know, but you know, that's a whole nother conversation.
So I know Brother Kaba probably doesn't know yet, but check out whatever he's going to do on Monday, 3 to 5 p.m. on WPFW. And again, shout out to Katya Stitt. Please make sure you check out the last offering from the Black Myths podcast on Afro-Cubans and more. I mean, it's really a great conversation and a lot of good Spanish to practice on. You get that as well. And do you already know what's coming next from Black Myths? Do you already know what's coming next?
We're doing we're sticking with the Angela Davis was a Black Panther. That's the myth. So we're trying to finalize an interview with Dr. Joy James. Just waiting on that email. But we'll see if she comes through. That would be perfect. But yeah, we're gonna cover that. We want to walk through not just the fact that she wasn't a Black Panther, but like I think I said this on the show I was on last time. Like read the biography or finishing up the biography or her autobiography, which I don't think is referenced enough, and then just really walking through that timeline of like what was happening, what the difference was between the Black Panther, you know, social group or study group, you know, at the time, and tying that to George Jackson and how they met up, and just kind of walking through that general timeline, because it just gets real foggy, you know, when we talk about Angela Davis. Sometimes I don't even know why people even know they like Angela Davis. They just know she just did some radical shit, you know. So I might even
narrative
that DaBaby interview too.
Yeah.
Say what?
Now I was saying that narrative piece again. You know, they don't know who she is. They just know she's important. They don't know who she is. They just know that she represented some kind of Black power or whatever. But they don't really know. If you ask one or two questions about who she actually was, they don't, or is, they don't know.
I can't wait for that. And big shout out to Joy James. That, you know, anyway.
She gonna put one of them Captain Maternal whippings on girl, I guess.
She's vicious. She is vicious. I cannot wait for that. So
I
appreciate
in a nice way though. She
in a nice way
with a smile.
It feels like you're talking to your loving grandmother, and then you walk away and wonder where's all this blood coming from?
Right, all these holes and stuff. I thought she was patting me on the back.
You know what I'm saying? Like, wait a minute.
Got all this blood in my back.
On the way to.
Yeah, damn.
Yeah, Joy, man, she's the best, man. I love that. That's gonna be great. And people definitely have to check out all of her work. Anyway, so I look forward to that. But on everything. Yeah, go ahead.
On my program, we're gonna be definitely honoring Dr. Runoko.
Okay, word up.
On Monday. So I do know what I'm going to talk about this Monday.
Okay, all right, good.
Talk about it. And I'm gonna try to get into some other things, but I doubt if I'll have time. Yeah.
No, it really, you know, honestly, you know, I haven't done enough, you know, I didn't know him personally, but he was certainly a big time figure in my own work. And I thought he was going to snatch my head off my shoulders that one time, the one time only. I messed around years ago and took one picture of one slide during one of his presentations.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments where I was like, oh, damn, that's dope. And click. And as soon as I hit the click, I was like, uh-oh, I just knew. And he said, brother.
Well, I felt listen, I felt that way too. I felt, because, you know, and I know some people will probably say this in the chat, I haven't checked, but yes, he was an Obama guy. You know, so I definitely didn't agree with him on that. And we kind of were at odds, because I did know him, and we were kind of at odds on that. But I think larger than that, I think, you know, just being sophisticated enough to understand that listen, my parents are for Obama, but I'm not going to, you know, get away from my parents either.
Right.
You know, there's just certain things we're not going to all agree on. So I'm not going to hold the totality of his work hostage by those 8 years. So, but I think just
no, you're a testament
the greater
to it.
aspect of his work. Yeah.
Look, I got vaccinated. You still hang with me a little bit. So, you know what I'm saying? You are a principled dude, man. You are a very principled dude. Hey, man, but seriously, like, look, Charles Finch, I wouldn't say he was pro-Obama, but he told me he was inevitable and, not to be resisted.
He was,
so like.
No, he's, yeah.
No, go ahead. I think you broke up there.
I'm sorry about this lag, man, because it sounds like we're talking over each other. No, I know he said something about, the stars and about an Ethiopian prince, and it kind of aligned with the time that Obama. And I love Dr. Finch, but of course,
that's what I'm saying.
There's certain things I'm just gonna be like, yeah, not so much on that.
Yeah. So anyway,
most of the other stuff, yeah, but that nah.
Oh, of course. So look, I appreciate you doing that. I will definitely check out that show. Rest in peace to Runoko Rashidi and power to his family and crew. Two Black. Thanks again, man. I again, my favorites are always these Two Black, Not Black Enough segments here on I Mix What I Like. And Brother Kaba, I really appreciate you again as always. Man, everybody.
Thank you all.
Oh, don't forget. Oh man, don't forget. Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern, Frank Wilderson, 2.5 hours or so, right here live. We got a special on a Sunday in advance of Sundays with the Ear Doctor Sunday night. So 1 p.m. on Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern, come on through. And I've already told him, Frank, we gotta get into some of this. I've taken some darts and some shots. We got to get into some things. And he's like, let's go. So I'm finishing up his latest book now. We're going to get into a whole bunch of all the discussions and all the criticism. So please come back 1 o'clock right here on I Mix What I Like live in Black Power Media. Anyway, as is always, if we didn't get to everything, I don't see the chat live, but I will come back later. So please
put it in the comments.
And I'll catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like live in Black Power Media. Thanks, everybody. Peace. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.